All right. Well, listen, folks, I'm so glad that you're with us this week. If you missed this week, you would really miss a treat. This gentleman is somebody that I have really admired for a number of years. In fact, our paths crossed years ago before I was fully aware of who he was. But just to give you a couple of the highlights, because we don't do long bios, we don't have the time to do it, but he's a former executive vice president of CareNet, which, of course, is a national network of crisis pregnancy centers that serves this entire country. He is the founder of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, which is, of course, a foundation that lifts up the values of Frederick Douglass, who was a person who believed in the Constitution, happened to be a Republican, believed very much in the future of our country, a former slave who nevertheless believed in the future and the promise of America. And Dean Nelson is one of the founders of that organization. There's a lot more I could say about him, but I'll leave you to do that. Google his name or talk to him at another time. But my good friend, a fellow minister in the gospel, Dean Nelson. Dean, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Bishop, for the opportunity. You and Daniel, I've enjoyed working with you in the cause for freedom. And, boy, this is an important topic, so thank you for hosting these calls. And let me beg of you to continue to do so, because there is an urgency, and someone needs to be able to provide these type of forums for information to be exchanged and to encourage people of all faiths to be engaged in the process. So thank you so much. What I would like to do for the moments that we have is to actually first talk a little bit about my involvement and how I got involved with what's now kind of known as the Hobby Lobby case. Take a few moments also to talk about the organization as well as the lawyers, the firms that are representing them, their story, and then a quick timeline as to kind of how these things have transpired, and then kind of what's at stake and what we should expect, once the court renders its decision. So first, as Bishop stated, I serve as the chairman of the board for the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and we often get calls from the Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, to help them with providing amicus briefs for a host of cases, whether it's at the circuit court level or at the Supreme Court, as in this case. And they contacted me because they wanted to get some specifically ministers involved with this case, as well as several organizations, to be represented with a friend of the court brief, and that was submitted. In fact, I believe that there were some 60 friend of the court briefs that were submitted on behalf of Hobby Lobby and another organization or company that we'll mention, Conestoga Woods, which is another faith-based company. So that's kind of how we got engaged. And I did want to highlight that, too, because ADF was specifically representing Conestoga Woods, which is a faith-based company that basically is a wood manufacturing company in Pennsylvania. The owners of that company actually are Mennonite and had deeply held convictions about this case. And so the Supreme Court actually brought both of these cases together to hear just last week on Tuesday. In addition to ADF, it was the Beckett Fund that specifically represented Hobby Lobby in this case, and they're the folks that have provided a lot of information. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background so that you know kind of what actually took place with this historic case that was heard just last week. But it was on November 26, 2013, that the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear Sebelius versus Hobby Lobby. And pretty much at that time, it was a case that was arising out of the commitment of the Green family, the sole owners of Hobby Lobby stores, to live out their deeply held religious convictions, quite honestly, operating their company in a manner consistent with their biblical principles. These principles were certainly put to test when the federal government mandated through Obamacare that the Greens and their family business provide 4 specific, potentially life-terminating drugs and devices through their employees' health plan. One of the things that I think is important to note is that the Greens are an evangelical family, the owners of Hobby Lobby. And Hobby Lobby, just so that you know, has over 500 stores with 28,000 people that they actually employ, which is remarkable in terms of the growth of the company over the last several years. But the thing that I wanted to highlight is that they're not a Catholic company. A lot of the media has kind of generated this thing as if they want to prevent contraception. And in fact, 16 out of the 20 FDA-approved drugs for contraception, Hobby Lobby already provides through the insurance that they give their employees. But there's 4 specifically, if you understand, they're abortifacient. So what's at stake is that they're saying that there are 4 drugs that they do not want to provide coverage for because they don't prevent pregnancy. What they really do is after the egg is fertilized, they prevent implantation. So that in effect is after the egg has been fertilized. So they don't want to take the innocent life. So that's kind of what's at stake. Accordingly, the Greens and their family business filed suit September in 2012 to defend their right to religious freedom under the Constitution and the federal law. So throughout, the Greens have been assisted and represented in this case by the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty based in D.C., which is a faith-based organization that does very similar to what ADF does, and that is they seek to protect religious liberty. One of the things that a lot of people did not kind of understand with regard to this, there are probably about 60 or 70 other kind of similar cases like this that are kind of making their way through the national court system. But the reason that this particular case kind of was put on the fast track is because this, unlike the others, are for-profit businesses that are being forced to do this under the Obamacare mandate, unlike many of the others, like faith-based institutions or religious schools, which actually under the newer provisions of the Obama administration, they actually can wait a year before they have to do anything. But these for-profit companies don't have that luxury, and so this is why there was a push for them to actually make it through the Supreme Court, and it's expected that the court will make its rendering sometime in the month of June. A couple of other quick facts about Hobby Lobby and then what's at stake regarding this, because obviously it's a very important case, and Bishop Jackson is the attorney online, but he talked and prayed a little bit earlier about the Constitution. And when we think about the Constitution in the First Amendment, it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And, when we think about some of the very first things of our Constitution, this is really fundamentally of what's at stake. You have a faith-based company that has demonstrated the highest standards. It's not commonly known, but that Hobby Lobby actually pays their employees 90% above minimum wage. They actually are a company that's closed on Sundays, have a commitment to providing health care for all of their full-time employees. So really what's at stake here is, one, the freedom to live out your faith, particularly if you want to do that in the context of running your business. Two, the freedom from the threat of fines, crippling fines in this case. And it's estimated that if Hobby Lobby followed suit with what the government mandated, it would be between $26 million to over $100 million a year that Hobby Lobby would have to pay, and, of course, violate their conscience. In addition, freedom from government intrusion, which obviously is a First Amendment issue. And then lastly, the free and full participation of all people of faith in all areas of public life, including the marketplace. So I would like for a couple of moments now just to allow for any questions. There's a lot of details, but just to make it clear, this case was heard on last Tuesday for the Supreme Court. I've actually listened to most of the arguments itself, and it was very interesting hearing some of those. Those actually are available online to actually listen. But I think that coming out of the case, it's always difficult to assess how things will play out, but it does look favorable, I do believe, for Hobby Lobby. Of course, in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, they were affirmed and upheld, but in another case with Conestoga, the courts did not side with them. And so that's one of the reasons the Supreme Court is much needed to make a decision in this matter. And so, Daniel, what I'll do is I'll open it up for some questions with regard to this important landmark case.
Thank you so much, Dean. Wow, that you gave us some facts that probably most of us didn't really have, and you're right. We have associated Hobby Lobby with the Catholic community. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the mainstream media tries to suggest that, well, they've got a sort of an extreme view on contraception that most Americans, even most Catholics, don't share. But so it's helpful to know it's not about that. Folks, if you have questions or comments, please dial *6 and get in queue now. And I'm going to open up the questioning myself, but you dial *6, get in queue, and we'll take you on a first-come, first-served basis. Dean, Hobby Lobby is representative of a much bigger issue. And the bigger issue is this increasing tendency to want to, persecute Christians, just basically stop all expressions of Christian faith in the public square. And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We're seeing it in the judiciary. Tell us what your view is on the impact of the Hobby Lobby case, whichever way it goes.
Sure. Well, it's going to be huge in this sense, because the reason, again, that it was being fast forwarded to the court is because it is a for-profit business, and the Obama administration has made provisions, quote unquote, at least for now, for nonprofit institutions, for religious schools, but it is going to be huge as it relates to Christian businesses and Christian leaders who want to be involved, in business. Again, you have deeply held convictions by leaders, and this is the first time that we're seeing the federal government obviously mandating that you pay for something that your employees may or may not want, and that it violate your very conscience. So from that standpoint, this is going to be landmark, and I would invite people to visit Hobby Lobby's website or the Beckett Fund, because there are links where you can actually listen to the oral arguments. But this is going to be huge, particularly in seeing, of course, this particular administration, which is not friendly to business, is consistently using the force of government to trample on business, particularly small business, medium-sized business. Again, Hobby Lobby, 500 stores around the country, 28,000 employees. And it's going to have a negative effect on the economy. I mean, even from the standpoint of businesses having to make these concessions or, going out of business, which, Hobby Lobby, the Green family, they're multimillionaires. They give millions of dollars every year to Christian organizations. They're fine. But what happens if they decide to close their doors? 28,000 people are now without jobs. There's a whole, system that, that would be impacted, by this decision.